The doors burst open just as the officiant was about to say those final words. Every head in that church turned to see a 13-year-old boy, breathing hard, trembling, but standing his ground. The bride's smile vanished. The groom's face went pale. And in that moment, everything this family thought they knew was about to shatter. What you're about to hear isn't Hollywood fiction. It's the true story of how one observant child saved his father from a nightmare disguised as a dream come true. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to connect with you. And make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the stories we uncover here, they'll make you question everything you think you know about the people around you. A wedding is supposed to be a celebration, a promise, a beginning. But for the Taylor family, this wedding was almost the end of everything. 3 questions haunted this ceremony from the very start. First, who was this woman? A bride with no past, no family at the wedding, no old friends sharing embarrassing stories at the reception. Just empty spaces where a lifetime should have been. Second, why the rush? From first date to wedding day in just 90 days. Most people take longer to buy a car than this couple took to plan a marriage. And third, the question that changes everything. What could a child possibly see that all the adults missed? This is the story of Emmanuel Taylor, 13 years old, quiet, observant, the kind of kid who notices when something doesn't add up. His father, James Taylor, was a successful businessman, 6 years a widower, 6 long years of raising his son alone, building his consulting firm, making smart investments. They weren't millionaires, but they were comfortable, very comfortable. And then there was her, the woman who called herself Sophia Hayes. Beautiful, charming, perfect, perhaps too perfect. To understand how we got here, we need to go back, 6 years back, to the day everything changed for the Taylor family. Emmanuel was 7 years old when cancer took his mother, and in the years that followed, it became just him and his dad against the world. They built routines, Friday pizza nights, weekend chess tournaments, evening walks around the neighborhood. They were a team. James Taylor poured everything into 2 things, his business and his son. The business thrived, but Emmanuel, observant as always, noticed what his father tried to hide: the loneliness, the way his dad's eyes would linger on couples walking past, the forced smile when friends brought their wives to dinner. His father was drowning in an ocean of solitude and doing everything he could to hide it from his son. So when James finally started dating again, Emmanuel was genuinely happy for him. He wanted his father to find companionship, to smile without forcing it. The first few women were nice: a teacher, an accountant, a pediatrician. But nothing clicked. Nothing lasted more than a few dates. Until one Saturday morning in March, the morning that changed everything. James had been seeing someone new. He'd mentioned her a few times over the past month, but Emmanuel hadn't thought much of it. Just another date that would probably fizzle out. But then his father asked him to come downstairs, said there was someone special he wanted Emmanuel to meet. And there she was, standing in their living room like she already owned it. Designer clothes that probably cost more than their monthly grocery bill. Hair styled to perfection. Makeup that looked professionally applied. She turned, and her smile was blinding. Her name was Sophia Hayes, or so she said. And from that very first moment, something in Emmanuel's gut twisted. Not jealousy, not resistance to change. Something else, something wrong. Her laugh was too loud. Her gestures too animated. Every movement felt choreographed, like an actress who'd rehearsed her lines but hadn't quite nailed the authenticity. Emmanuel forced a smile, shook her hand, said all the right things. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. And his father? His father was completely under her spell. James beamed every time she laughed at his jokes. He stood taller when she touched his arm. For the first time in 6 years, Emmanuel saw his father truly light up around someone. Over the next few weeks, Sophia became a constant presence in their home. Sunday dinners, movie nights. She'd even started leaving clothes in the guest room. Little pieces of herself scattered throughout the house, like she was marking territory. But while James saw a woman who made him feel alive again, Emmanuel saw the cracks in the performance. He started keeping a mental list of things that didn't add up. The inconsistencies started small. One night at dinner, Sophia mentioned her sister lived in Portland. Emmanuel remembered because his mom had always wanted to visit Portland. But then, a week later, his father casually suggested visiting her family in Seattle. And Sophia just went along with it like she'd never said Portland at all. Emmanuel tried to convince himself it was nothing. People misspeak. People forget details. But then there were other things. Sophia had no photos on her phone of family or childhood friends. Her social media seemed strangely empty for a 32-year-old woman. And whenever James asked about her past relationships or her family, she'd change the subject with practiced ease. The night his father told him about Sophia, Emmanuel lay awake until almost 3 in the morning, staring at his ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. But how do you tell your father that the first woman who's made him happy in 6 years might be lying? How do you destroy someone's joy based on nothing but a gut feeling? 90 days. That's all it took for Sophia Hayes to go from stranger to fiancée. 90 days to completely transform the Taylor household and wrap James around her perfectly manicured finger. When James proposed in June at an expensive downtown restaurant, Emmanuel wasn't invited. He found out the next morning when they walked in glowing, Sophia flashing a diamond ring that probably cost more than Emmanuel's college fund. His father was floating on air. Emmanuel felt like he was drowning, because by then, Emmanuel wasn't just suspicious anymore. He was investigating, and what he was finding terrified him. It started innocently enough. Emmanuel searched for Sophia Hayes on Facebook, found her profile easily, 47 friends, all added within the past year. No tag photos from high school or college. No embarrassing throwback pictures. No digital footprint before 12 months ago. It was like she'd been born fully formed last spring. So Emmanuel went deeper. Google searches, LinkedIn, public records. And that's when the cracks in Sophia's story became chasms. He found 3 profiles, 3 different women with 3 different names, but the same face, the same eyes, the same calculated smile. Sophie Harris in Denver, Sophia Henderson in Charlotte, Sophia Hayes here. Emmanuel's hand shook as he took screenshots. His heart hammered so loud he was afraid his father might hear it through the walls. This wasn't just suspicious anymore. This was proof that the woman his father wanted to marry was living under a fake identity. But Emmanuel needed more, because 3 social media profiles with similar names could be explained away. Maybe they were cousins. Maybe it was coincidence. Emmanuel needed undeniable evidence. During the day, he played the role of the accepting son, smiling when Sophia brought home wedding magazines, nodding when they discussed ceremony locations, acting like everything was fine while his stomach twisted into knots. But at night, Emmanuel became someone else. A detective, a spy in his own home. He started paying attention to everything. Every phone call Sophia took in hushed tones, every time she'd disappear into the guest room with her laptop, every expensive purchase that appeared on his father's credit card statements. One afternoon, Emmanuel was alone in the house when Sophia's phone rang. She'd left it on the kitchen counter while she showered. Emmanuel stared at it. His conscience screamed at him not to look. But his instincts told him this might be his only chance. He answered it, said nothing, just listened. A man's voice came through, rough, impatient. He said, "We still on schedule? Then, make sure you get the account numbers before the wedding. We can't wait around forever. And finally, if the kid's a problem, deal with it." Emmanuel hung up, put the phone back exactly where he found it, ran to his room, and threw up. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just weird social media profiles or vague answers about family. This was a conspiracy, and Emmanuel was in danger. That evening, James announced the wedding date at dinner. August 15th, 6 weeks away. Sophia smiled, that perfect smile, and said something about not wanting to wait when you found your soulmate. Emmanuel could barely choke down his food. 6 weeks. Emmanuel had 6 weeks to figure out who Sophia really was, what she was planning, and how to stop it. 6 weeks to save his father from a disaster he couldn't even see coming. And then, late one night, while searching for any information he could find, Emmanuel stumbled across something that made his blood run cold. A news article from 2 years ago, from Denver, about a woman who targeted wealthy widowers and divorces. She'd wine them, dine them, marry them, then drain their accounts and disappear before anyone realized what happened. 3 confirmed victims. Total losses exceeding $2 million. And the police had never caught her. The article included a photo, blurry, taken from security footage. Different hair color, different makeup, but the same eyes, the same bone structure. The same woman who was sleeping in their guest room and planning to become Emmanuel's stepmother in 6 weeks. Emmanuel printed everything. The articles, the social media profiles, the timeline. He created a folder and hid it under his mattress. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that Sophia Hayes, or whatever her real name was a predator, and his father was the prey. The truth was clear. But would anyone believe a 13-year-old boy? Emmanuel Taylor was 13 years old, and he'd just uncovered a criminal conspiracy. But he was also just a kid who needed help, a kid who needed adults to take him seriously. That turned out to be harder than he expected. His English teacher, Mrs. Palmer, had always been kind to him, understanding. She'd helped him through tough times after his mother died. If anyone would listen, Emmanuel thought it would be her. He showed her everything, the multiple profiles, the news articles, the timeline, the inconsistencies. He laid it all out methodically, desperately hoping she'd see what he saw. But instead of alarm, Emmanuel saw pity. Mrs. Palmer gently explained that lots of people have similar names, that the photos could be anyone, that it's normal for adults to keep parts of their past private. She suggested that maybe Emmanuel was having trouble adjusting to his father remarrying, that maybe he should talk to the school counselor about his feelings. She thought he was jealous, protective, a kid acting out because his family dynamic was changing. She didn't believe him. His best friend's dad was a lawyer. Emmanuel tried him next, showing up at their house with his folder of evidence. The man listened politely, even looked through the papers. But then he said something that crushed Emmanuel's hopes. He said that without concrete proof of criminal activity, current, documented criminal activity, there was nothing anyone could legally do, and that the articles could be about anyone. Lots of people looked similar. Nobody believed him. To every adult Emmanuel approached, he was just an emotional teenager having trouble with change. The evidence that seemed so damning to him looked circumstantial to everyone else. So Emmanuel tried the hardest conversation of all. He tried talking to his father. He chose his words carefully. Didn't want to sound accusatory, just raise concerns. The quick timeline, the vague answers about her past, the fact that none of her family was coming to the wedding. He tried to plant seeds of doubt without outright calling Sophia a liar. But James didn't want to hear it. He'd been alone for 6 years. 6 years of loneliness, of feeling incomplete, of watching everyone else live in pairs while he navigated the world solo. And now, finally, he'd found someone who made him feel whole again. Someone who laughed at his jokes and held his hand and made the house feel less empty. James told Emmanuel he appreciated the concern, that he understood this was an adjustment, but Sophia was good for him. Sophia made him happy. And wasn't that what Emmanuel wanted? For his dad to be happy. The conversation ended with James suggesting maybe they could all do more things together as a family. Help Emmanuel get to know Sophia better. Build trust. He completely missed the point. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. That night, Emmanuel heard Sophia's voice through the walls. She was on the phone with someone, whispering but not quietly enough. She was laughing about the conversation. Called Emmanuel the little problem that would sort itself out. Said James was completely wrapped around her finger. Said the account numbers were already secured. Just a few more weeks, and they'd be set for years. In that moment, something shifted in Emmanuel. He realized he was alone in this. No adult was going to save his father. If anyone was going to stop this wedding, it would have to be him. So Emmanuel doubled down on his investigation. He started documenting everything with timestamps and photos. He tracked Sophia's movements. He noted every phone call, every suspicious conversation, every expensive purchase. And he dug deeper into her past, using every online tool a tech-savvy teenager could find. Reverse image searches, public records databases, court filings. Emmanuel became obsessed, sleeping 4 hours a night, barely eating. His father thought he was stressed about school. He had no idea his son was racing against time. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emmanuel found a smoking gun, a sealed court document from Portland that had been digitized but not properly redacted. It detailed a fraud case against a woman named Sarah Martinez. The charges had been dropped on a technicality, but the details were all there. Sarah Martinez had targeted a widower named Robert Shun, swept him off his feet, got engaged in record time, gained access to his finances. Then, 3 days after the wedding, she cleaned out his accounts, personal savings, business accounts, retirement funds, and vanished. Total take, $800,000. Robert Shun lost his business, his home, his future. The document included a photo from Sarah Martinez's driver's license. And there she was, Emmanuel's future stepmother. Older photo, different hair, wearing glasses, but unmistakably her. Emmanuel printed it, added it to his evidence folder, and realized with sinking dread that he now had proof positive that Sophia Hayes was a career criminal. And in 2 weeks, she'd be legally married to his father with full access to everything he owned. But who would believe him? He'd already tried teachers, lawyers, even his own father. What was a kid supposed to do with evidence that every adult dismissed? And then Emmanuel remembered something his mother used to say. When you've exhausted all the reasonable options, sometimes you have to do something unreasonable. He knew what he had to do. It was crazy. It would humiliate his father. It might destroy their relationship. But it was the only way. Emmanuel was going to stop the wedding. Publicly. Dramatically. In front of everyone. And he was going to make sure this time people couldn't look away. But what Emmanuel didn't know was that Sophia had started to notice his snooping. And she was making plans of her own. 1 week. 7 days until Sophia Hayes became Sophia Taylor and gained legal access to everything James had built. 7 days until Emmanuel's father would be locked into the biggest mistake of his life. The house was chaos. Seating charts, menu tastings, Sophia orchestrating everything with military precision while Emmanuel watched from the sidelines, his folder of evidence hidden under his mattress like a ticking time bomb. But Emmanuel needed one more piece. He had the past crimes. He had the fake identities. What he didn't have was proof of what she was planning to do to his father. The smoking gun that would make everything undeniable. And then, opportunity knocked. James had to fly to Seattle for an emergency business meeting. 2 days away. He'd missed the final cake tasting, but Sophia insisted she and Emmanuel could handle it. Actually, bonding time, she called it, with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. The moment James's car pulled out of the driveway, Sophia's demeanor changed. The sweet act vanished like smoke. She was cold, businesslike. She spent the evening on her laptop in the guest room, door closed, voice low. Emmanuel knew this was his chance, probably his last chance. When Sophia finally went to bed around midnight, he waited 1 hour, 2 hours, until the house was completely silent except for the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. The guest room door wasn't locked. Why would it be? To Sophia, Emmanuel was just a kid, a minor inconvenience, not a threat. That was her first mistake. Her laptop was on the desk, closed but not password protected. Emmanuel's hands shook as he opened it, praying the glow wouldn't wake her. She was asleep on the bed, back to him, breathing steady. And there, on her desktop, was a folder labeled JO Project. James Taylor. Emmanuel clicked it open. What Emmanuel found made his stomach drop. Bank account numbers, password lists, financial documents, transfer protocols. Every single detail of his father's financial life, organized and ready for liquidation. There were even draft transfer forms, pre-filled, waiting for Sophia's signature as his legal spouse. But it got worse. There was a communications folder. Encrypted messages between Sophia and someone named him. Emmanuel opened the most recent thread and felt the world tilt beneath him. The messages laid out the entire plan. The honeymoon, a week in the Maldives, would actually be a week for Sophia to execute wire transfers to offshore accounts. By the time they returned, James's accounts would be empty. Sophia would immediately file for an annulment claiming fraud on James's part. Ironic. And disappear before anyone realized what happened. Clean. Simple. She'd done it 4 times before. Emmanuel grabbed his phone, started taking photos of everything. Evidence no one could dismiss. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the camera steady. And then the bed creaked. Emmanuel froze. Looked up. Sophia was sitting up, watching him. No longer asleep. Maybe she'd never been asleep at all. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sophia smiled. Not the warm, practiced smile she gave James. Something else. Something dangerous. She didn't yell, didn't threaten. She just spoke, her voice calm and cold as ice. She told Emmanuel he was smart. Smarter than the other kids from her previous cons who never noticed anything. But smart didn't matter, she said, because no one would believe him. They never did. She'd already planted seeds with James that Emmanuel was struggling with the marriage, might even try to sabotage it. If he spoke up now, he'd just look like a desperate, jealous kid. Then she said something that chilled Emmanuel to his core. She said accidents happen. Kids get hurt all the time. Falls downstairs. Wandering into traffic. Such tragedies. And with his father so devastated by Emmanuel's sudden death, he'd need her support more than ever. The wedding might even be moved up out of need for comfort. Emmanuel ran. Didn't think. Just bolted from the room, phone clutched in his hand. He locked himself in his bedroom, pushed his desk against the door, and called his father. No answer. Called again. No answer. James was on a flight, phone off. Emmanuel sat on his floor until sunrise, back against the barricaded door, waiting for her to try to break in. She never did. And when morning came and Emmanuel finally crept downstairs, Sophia was in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened. She smiled at him, that sweet, fake smile, and said, "Good morning, sweetie. Ready for another day of wedding planning?" Emmanuel realized the truth. She was so confident, so experienced at this game, that she genuinely didn't think he could stop her. She'd threatened him to keep him quiet, but she didn't think he was brave enough or foolish enough to act. That was her second mistake, because Emmanuel had made a decision in those long hours sitting against his bedroom door. He was going to stop this wedding. He didn't care about the embarrassment, didn't care if his father never forgave him, didn't care if everyone thought he was crazy. He was going to save his father's life, even if it destroyed their relationship forever. August 15th arrived with perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, the kind of day people dream about for weddings. Inside the church, white roses adorned every surface. 300 guests filled the pews, and Emmanuel Taylor sat in the front row wearing his new suit, his phone heavy in his pocket, carrying evidence that would shatter everything. His father stood at the altar, nervous but glowing. James kept glancing back at Emmanuel, giving him reassuring smiles. He thought his son was anxious about the wedding. He had no idea Emmanuel was about to blow up his entire world. Emmanuel had barely slept in 3 days. He'd spent every waking moment since that confrontation with Sophia planning this moment. He'd contacted the police, anonymously at first, sending them the evidence photos, the court documents, everything. They'd been interested, but couldn't act without more information. The detective had asked Emmanuel to call back, to give a formal statement. But by then, it would be too late. So Emmanuel had made his own plan. A plan so public, so undeniable, that Sophia couldn't talk her way out, that his father couldn't dismiss, that the police would have to take seriously. The music started, Wagner's bridal chorus. Every head turned toward the back of the church. And there she was, Sophia Hayes, or Sarah Martinez, or Sophie Harris, or whatever her real name was, walking down the aisle in a $15,000 dress paid for with James Taylor's credit card, smiling behind her veil, about to legally bind herself to her next victim. Emmanuel watched her approach, watched his father's face light up with joy, watched the officiant open his book. This was really happening. Unless Emmanuel did something right now, this woman would marry his father, and in a week, they'd be financially destroyed. Sophia reached the altar, took James's hand. They turned to face the officiant. The ceremony began. Emmanuel heard the words, but couldn't process them. His heart was hammering so hard he thought everyone in the church could hear it. His moment was coming. The phrase everyone jokes about, but nobody actually acts on. Speak now, or forever hold your peace. And then the officiant spoke those words, asked if anyone present knew of any lawful impediment to this marriage. The church was silent. Nobody ever actually speaks up. It's just tradition. The officiant was already moving on to the next part of the ceremony when Emmanuel stood. His legs were shaking so badly he thought they might give out, but he stood, and he spoke. His voice cracked at first, barely audible, but then stronger, louder. He said, "I object. My father can't marry this woman because she's not who she says she is." The church erupted. 300 people talking at once. James's face went from confused to horrified to angry in seconds. He started to say something, to tell Emmanuel to sit down, to apologize. But Emmanuel wasn't done. Emmanuel pulled out his phone, projected photos onto the wall using the church's display system. He tested it the night before during rehearsal when everyone else had gone home. Photo after photo appeared. The fake IDs, the court documents, the financial files, the text messages planning the heist. Emmanuel's voice grew stronger as he spoke. He detailed everything. The pattern of crimes across 4 states, the previous victims, the fake names, the offshore accounts. He laid it all out methodically, like presenting a case to a jury. Because in a way he was. Sophia tried to interrupt, tried to dismiss it as a child's fantasy, a jealous boy acting out. But the evidence was there, projected 20 feet high where everyone could see. Bank documents with her signature, photos of her with previous victims, court records that couldn't be faked. Then Emmanuel said something that made the entire room go silent. He said, 3 nights ago, she threatened to kill me if I told anyone. Said accidents happen to kids. She's not just a thief. She's dangerous. And that's when Sophia made her final mistake. Instead of continuing to play innocent, instead of maintaining the act, she snapped. Maybe it was the public humiliation. Maybe it was the shock of a 13-year-old outsmarting her. But she dropped the mask completely. She turned to Emmanuel with pure venom and said, "You stupid little brat. You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea how long I've been planning this? Your pathetic father was supposed to be easy money. 3 months of pretending to care about his boring stories, and I would have been set for years." The church fell silent. Even Sophia seemed to realize what she'd just done. 300 witnesses, dozens of phones recording, a full confession caught on video. James stared at the woman he'd been about to marry like he'd never seen her before. Because he hadn't. He'd been in love with the character she was playing. The real person standing there in the wedding dress was a complete stranger. Sophia tried to run. She actually kicked off her heels and bolted for the side door. But Emmanuel had planned for that too. Remember those anonymous tips to the police? They'd been outside waiting, listening through the church doors, hoping Emmanuel's intelligence was correct. 2 officers intercepted her before she made it 5 steps. As they put her in handcuffs, Sophia was still screaming, calling Emmanuel names, blaming him for ruining her score, threatening lawsuits. But her words just became more evidence piling up against her. The lead detective approached Emmanuel, who was now sitting in the front pew, adrenaline wearing off, shaking uncontrollably. The detective put a hand on his shoulder and said something Emmanuel would never forget. He said, "Kid, you just saved your father's life. Probably saved other people's lives too. That woman had 3 more marks lined up after your dad." As the police led Sophia out through the church doors, still in her wedding dress, photographers caught everything. It would be front-page news by evening. Teen hero stops wedding, exposes serial con artist. The story would go viral. Sophia's face would be everywhere. Her ability to scam anyone else was over. But inside the church, Emmanuel didn't feel like a hero. He sat in that front pew, surrounded by 300 stunned wedding guests, and watched his father sink into the chair beside him. James didn't say anything at first, just sat there, still in his tuxedo, staring at the altar where he'd almost made the worst mistake of his life. Finally, James spoke. His voice was hollow, broken. He said, "You tried to tell me. You tried so many times, and I wouldn't listen." Emmanuel didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to say, "I told you so." But mostly he just felt tired and sad. Sad for his father who'd been so desperate for companionship that he'd missed every red flag. Sad that his mother wasn't there to help them through this. Sad that the world had people like Sophia in it. James turned to his son with tears in his eyes, and he said the 3 words Emmanuel needed to hear more than anything. "Thank you, son." The aftermath took months to sort out. Police investigations, court proceedings. James had to change all his accounts, beef up his security, deal with the media attention. But here's the thing that matters. Emmanuel had been right. If the wedding had gone through, if Emmanuel had stayed quiet, Sophia would have drained everything. The business James built, the college fund Emmanuel's mother had started, the house they lived in, all of it would have been gone. The police investigation uncovered 6 previous victims, men whose lives Sophia had destroyed. The total stolen over 8 years was over $3 million. Some of the victims had lost everything. 2 had attempted suicide. 1 had succeeded. Sophia Hayes, whose real name turned out to be Jennifer Marks, was charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and in Emmanuel's case, threatening a minor. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She'd be 60 years old before she got out. For Emmanuel and James, life slowly returned to normal. Different normal, but normal. James became more careful, more skeptical. He started therapy to deal with the betrayal and to understand how he'd been manipulated. Emmanuel went back to school, where he was something of a celebrity for a few weeks before the attention died down. But the experience changed them both. James learned to listen to his son's instincts. Emmanuel learned that sometimes doing the right thing means destroying someone's happiness in the short term to save them in the long term. And most importantly, they learned to talk, really talk, about fears and concerns and red flags, about not being so desperate for happiness that you ignore warning signs, about trusting the people who truly love you, even when, especially when, they're telling you things you don't want to hear. A year later, James started dating again, slowly this time, and whenever he introduced Emmanuel to someone new, he'd watch his son's face carefully, looking for any sign of that gut instinct that had saved them both. The boy who stopped his father's wedding didn't just save his father's bank account. He saved his father's life. And in doing so, he proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up and shout the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. Emmanuel Taylor was 13 years old when he became the hero his family needed. A kid who trusted his instincts, who did the research, who refused to stay quiet even when every adult dismissed him. This story isn't just about a wedding or a con artist. It's about trust, betrayal, and the kind of courage that doesn't come from muscle or age. It comes from knowing what's right and refusing to back down. But here's the question I want you to think about. What would you have done? If you were Emmanuel, sitting in that church, knowing what you knew, would you have stood up? Would you have destroyed your father's happiness to save his future? Or would you have stayed quiet and hoped for the best? Drop your answer in the comments below. And while you're there, tell me, was Emmanuel right to expose Sophia in front of everyone? Should he have handled it privately? Could this have ended differently? I'm reading every single comment, and I want to hear your thoughts. This story has a happy ending. Emmanuel and James are doing well. James eventually remarried, carefully this time, to a wonderful woman with a very well-documented past. Emmanuel's in college now, studying criminal justice. He says the experience taught him that sometimes the people who need protecting the most are the ones who think they don't need protection at all. But not every story like this ends well. There are thousands of Sophias out there, con artists who prey on loneliness, on trust, on the basic human desire to be loved. And there are thousands of victims who never see it coming. According to the FBI, romance scams cost Americans over $500 million every year. That's billion with a B. And those are just the reported cases. Many victims are too embarrassed to come forward. So here's what you can learn from Emmanuel's story. First, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't dismiss your instincts just because you want something to be true. Second, be skeptical of rushed relationships, especially when money is involved. Sophia pushed for a 3-month engagement for a reason. Scammers work on tight timelines. Third, look for what's missing. Sophia had no old friends, no family at the wedding, no digital footprint before a certain date. Those absences are red flags. Fourth, and this is crucial, if someone you love is being scammed, don't give up trying to reach them. It took Emmanuel dozens of attempts. Keep presenting evidence. Keep expressing concern. Eventually, the truth has to break through. And finally, sometimes love means making the hard choice. Emmanuel could have stayed quiet, could have avoided the confrontation, but he loved his father enough to risk everything, including their relationship, to save him. Before we wrap up, I want you to hit that like button if this story moved you, shocked you, or taught you something. And subscribe if you want more true stories that will make you question everything. Because trust me, we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, trust your gut. It might just save your life.